If you'd told me I'd be fighting over one blanket with the guy I'd been crushing on for months, trapped in a tiny cabin during a storm, I probably would have laughed you off. Yet, here we were, me, Jason, and one ridiculously small threadbare blanket that, if we tried, might cover 1.5 people at best. It all started with what was supposed to be a low-key weekend getaway. Jason and I had been friends for a while. Actually, friends might be a bit generous. We'd flirted a lot, shared a few subtle looks, and I was pretty sure he'd caught on. But dating? That felt like stepping off a cliff we both weren't quite ready to jump from. So when he suggested a cabin trip through some mutual friends, I jumped at the chance. I figured, hey, maybe some time away from the city would make things easier, or at least give me a break from overthinking every text. We got to the cabin Friday afternoon, which was this rustic little shack tucked away near a lake, surrounded by pine trees and way too much silence. Total nature vibes. The kind of place where your phone loses signal halfway up the driveway and all you've got are board games, awkward small talk, and the natural soundtrack of, well, bugs and wind. Jason was already there when I arrived. He was sitting on the porch steps, sleeves rolled up, a half smile on his face like he was waiting for a cue to start some terrible joke. He looked more relaxed than I expected. Jeans, a faded flannel, that messy hair he never bothers to fix. Honestly, he was the kind of handsome that didn't need to try but still caught your eye anyway. I shoved my bag down. Trying not to make it obvious, I wanted to hang around him a little longer than just, hey, I'm here. We spent the afternoon setting up, bringing in firewood, unpacking, and just chatting enough to keep things comfortable but not awkward. The plan was simple. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just shut the world out for a couple of days. We joked about the old cabin's creaks and groans, pretending it was haunted, but mostly we just enjoyed the quiet. That night, the storm rolled in, harder than any forecast had warned. The wind picked up, rattling the windows like it had a personal vendetta against us. Rain hammered the tin roof, and every so often, a sharp crack of thunder split the sky. We'd lit a fire, but between the cold and the noise, it quickly became clear our cozy cabin bubble was going to be a little less cozy than planned. We gathered in the one room that had a bed, which was basically a lumpy mattress shoved against the wall, under what was, and I swear, the smallest blanket ever made. I looked at Jason, who was already shivering a bit, and then at the blanket, then back at him, and something about the way he glanced at me, half amused, half pleading, made the whole situation feel a little less miserable. That's when the battle began. Not for the blanket itself. Well, maybe a little, but for the space it symbolized, the warmth, the closeness, the excuse to lean in a little more than usual. I could feel my heart race, partly because I was cold, mostly because I was suddenly very aware of sitting this close to Jason in a storm, sharing one tiny blanket, no way out. I swear, if I'd had any control, I might have just wrapped the blanket around us both and pretended the world outside didn't exist. But life, as usual, had different plans, and the storm was only getting louder. That night, trapped in that cabin, under one blanket, with the rain pounding like it wanted to tear us apart, I realized something. Sometimes, being stuck with the person you want most can be the scariest and most exciting kind of storm. And I had no idea how it was going to play out. Jason shifted closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body, which honestly felt like a blessing against the cold that had seeped into my bones. The blanket barely covered both of us, and every time the wind gusted harder, it threatened to slip off one of our legs or shoulders. We both reached instinctively to pull it back over ourselves, and somehow, our hands met in the middle. I froze. His hand was warm, fingers just brushing against mine, and I swear my brain short-circuited for a second. I looked up, and Jason's eyes caught mine, that same half-amused, half-serious look he had earlier. But now there was something softer in there, like he was daring me to make a move, or silently asking if I wanted to. I swallowed hard and said, "We're gonna freeze if we don't figure this out." He laughed quietly, the sound low and a little nervous, the kind that makes you want to lean in closer just to hear more. "Yeah, or we could share the blanket properly," he teased, his voice dropping a notch. "Right," I said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. so we scooted closer until our shoulders were touching under that ridiculously small blanket, and honestly, it felt nice. More than nice, like all the months of half-glances and awkward texts boiled down to this exact moment in a cramped cabin during a storm. The thunder rolled outside, but inside, it was quiet, except for our breathing and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. I kept stealing glances at him, noticing the way his eyes softened when they met mine, the slight curve of his lips, and how even his nervous energy was kind of magnetic. I really wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. So I just let the silence hang there, hoping he'd fill it. And he did. "You always get cold this easily?" Jason asked, nudging me gently with his shoulder. "Yeah, pretty much. I'm basically a walking popsicle." I joked, trying to lighten the mood. He smiled, that slow, genuine kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. "Good thing I'm here then. Popsicle rescuer, at your service." I laughed, then felt my cheeks heat up, probably from the warmth, or maybe from him teasing me. "I'm not sure if you're really rescuing me, or just trying to get warm yourself." Jason shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe a bit of both." There was a pause, this almost electric silence between us. The storm outside was raging, but in here, under that one small blanket, everything felt suddenly calm and contained, like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. And maybe, just maybe, this was what I'd been waiting for all along. Then, out of nowhere, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness save for the dim glow of the fire dying in the hearth. Jason swore softly, the sound surprisingly close to my ear. "Well, now it's official," he said, voice a little shaky. "We're stuck in the dark with one blanket and failing electricity." I laughed, but honestly, the darkness didn't feel scary with him there. More like a challenge we had to figure out together. "Do you have your phone?" I asked, hoping to find some flashlight or at least a bit of light. Jason pulled out his phone, its screen the only beacon in the room. He handed it to me. "Here, you hold this. I'll try to get the fire going again." I took the phone, the light steady in my hand, and watched him move to the fireplace, crouching down as he tried to coax some life back into the ashes. It was in that moment I realized how much I was paying attention to the little things, the way his hands moved, the concentration on his face, the slight furrow in his brow. I kind of wanted to reach out and touch him, but instead, I just sat there, my heart beating a little too fast. Finally, after a few minutes, a spark caught and the fire flared back up. The cabin brightened again, warm orange light dancing on the walls, and Jason smiled triumphantly. "Victory," he said, sitting back down beside me. I smiled back, feeling braver than before. "So, maybe we should talk about the blanket situation." He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "Oh, what about it?" "Well," I began, trying to keep my tone casual, "I think it's clear that this blanket isn't big enough for two people to survive a storm. Maybe we could share it a little more fully." Jason's smile softened, and he shifted closer, the space between us barely existing now. "I think that's the best idea you've had all night." I swallowed the lump in my throat and decided to just go for it. Before I could finish, he reached over and lightly took my hand again, holding it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "I've been hoping you'd feel the same." My heart practically exploded, and for the first time all night, the storm outside didn't matter. Nothing did, except this moment. Us. The tiny cabin, the one blanket, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at something real. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes getting stuck in the middle of a storm with the person you want most isn't the worst place to be. It might just be the start of something neither of us saw coming. His hand was warm in mine, fingers curling around carefully like I was something fragile. I'd been trying to rehearse what to say all day, but now that it was real, words felt unnecessary. So I just squeezed his hand back, letting the silence fill the space between us, punctuated only by the fire crackling and the storm shushing outside. It was one of those moments where everything slows down, and you realize how much you want to stay exactly where you are. Jason shifted a little closer, and before I knew it, the blanket wrapped around both of us, cocooning us in a pocket of warmth. Our legs brushed, then our arms, and I caught the scent of his shampoo mixed with that piney cabin smell. It was oddly comforting. "So," he said quietly, like breaking the silence too loudly might shatter the spell. "How long have you been wanting to do this?" He nodded toward our proximity, obviously meaning the closeness between us. I laughed softly, feeling my cheeks heat up. Longer than I'd like to admit. I didn't think a storm and a tiny blanket would be the setting, though. Jason grinned, eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Well, I'm glad the storm brought us together. I wasn't sure if you'd ever make a move." I shrugged, pretending to be casual but failing. I'm a little scared of messing things up. "You know, with us," he repeated, like testing the words on his tongue. "Yeah, me too. But maybe this is us starting." No scripts, no pressure. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and nervous excitement. It was funny how being stuck in a cabin during a storm made everything so simple. Just two people figuring things out without pretense. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside it all felt safe. Almost like this cabin was a bubble where time didn't matter. Jason tilted his head and looked at me, that playful spark returning. "You know," he said, "we should probably make the best of this. We have a whole night with just us, one blanket and zero distractions." I laughed, feeling my heart do an embarrassing flip. Zero distractions is code for what? No phones, no awkward texting, just us? Exactly. So what should we do? Board games? Talk? Or maybe you want to confess more secrets? I raised an eyebrow. "Oh sure, start with the board games. I'm sure you'll totally crush me at Scrabble." He smirked. Challenge accepted. We pulled the small wooden board game from the shelf, a battered Scrabble set with faded letters, and set it up on the little table. The firelight flickered across the tiles, casting shadows on Jason's face. I couldn't help but notice how he bit his lip before making a move and how the corner of his mouth twitched with every word he spelled. The game was surprisingly fun, and with each turn, the awkwardness melted away. We joked about ridiculous made-up words and laughed when one of us spelled something impossibly obscure. Every so often, our arms or knees would brush, and neither of us pulled away anymore. At one point, I caught him staring at me just a little too long. I looked back, and he gave me this small, shy smile that made my stomach do flips. "Jason," I blurted, "can I ask you something a bit serious?" He nodded, his fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the table. "What made you ask me to come here? I mean, the trip wasn't your idea originally." His smile softened. "Honestly, I wanted an excuse to spend time with you away from the usual noise. Somewhere quiet so I could figure out if what I was feeling was real or just me being hopeful." That hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't the only one holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. "Well," I said, feeling braver, "I'm glad you did. Because sitting here with you now feels like the start of something worth taking a chance on." He reached across the table, fingers catching mine again, and it felt natural, right? Like we'd been orbiting this moment for ages, and finally landed. The storm outside softened to a gentle rain, pattering rhythmically on the roof. The fire burned low, casting a warm glow over everything. The blanket was still draped over us, but now it wasn't just about staying warm. It was a kind of shield, a signal that we were in this together. After a while, the game ended without a clear winner, mostly because neither of us was paying attention to the score anymore. We pushed the board aside and just sat there, hands linked, neither wanting to break the spell. "I'm really glad we're here," Jason said softly. "Me too," I replied. Even if it was cold, dark, and a little scary, it turned out pretty perfect. He smiled, and then, without thinking, I leaned in just a little, closing the distance between us. His breath hitched, and his eyes fluttered shut. Our lips met softly at first, tentative, like testing the water. Then deeper, warmer, like we'd been waiting for this exact moment forever. The storm outside faded into white noise as everything else disappeared. Just me, Jason, and that one tiny blanket that somehow managed to hold all the warmth and hope we needed. And in that cabin, with the rain tapping its steady rhythm, I finally felt like I wasn't just fighting the cold. I was fighting for something real, something worth holding on to. I don't know what the morning would bring, but for now, wrapped in that too small blanket with him, I was exactly where I wanted to be. When we finally pulled apart, the room felt charged in a way I hadn't expected. Our foreheads rested against each other, breaths mingling, and the storm outside seemed miles away, less a threat and more a soundtrack to this new, fragile moment between us. Jason chuckled softly, that warm, easy laugh that always made me want to stay close. Well, that's one way to stay warm. I smiled back, feeling the heat in my cheeks. Yeah, I guess that blanket just got a lot more useful. We settled back against the headboard, the blanket still draped loosely over our legs, and for a while, we just sat there, not needing to fill the silence with words. Every so often, our hands found each other again, fingers tracing lazy patterns that made my skin tingle. After a while, Jason broke the quiet. You ever think about how weird it is? Us, here, like this? I mean, I don't know if I ever imagined it happening exactly like this. I nodded slowly. Me too. I thought we'd just keep dancing around whatever this is, pretending it wasn't there. But now it feels like that was all just practice. He smiled, eyes shining. Practice for a real thing. Yeah, I agreed, feeling my heart speed up again. Something real. We talked for hours after that, about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, bad dates, dreams we'd never shared. The storm outside calmed to a drizzle, but inside, time seemed to stretch and bend around us. At some point, the blanket slipped off our legs, but neither of us moved to grab it. It didn't matter anymore. The warmth between us was enough. Eventually, Jason yawned, stretching, and then looking embarrassed. Guess we should try to sleep, huh? Even if the storm's dying down. I nodded, but inside I wondered how I was going to fall asleep next to him without replaying every second over and over. We lay down on the mattress, close but not quite touching, each wrapped in our own thoughts. Then, as if sensing I needed it, Jason shifted and gently pulled me closer, wrapping his arm around my waist. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. I closed my eyes, letting that simple promise settle over me. The cabin creaked softly, the rain tapping a gentle rhythm on the roof, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. Morning came softly, the storm reduced to mist and dripping leaves. When I opened my eyes, Jason was still asleep, a peaceful expression on his face that made my chest ache in a good way. I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and smiled. Last night felt like a dream. A perfect, unexpected start to something I hoped wasn't fleeting. We spent the next day wandering around the forest trails, the air fresh and crisp after the storm. The tension from the night before had shifted into something lighter, comfortable and real. We talked easily, laughed more than I'd expected, and found ourselves stealing glances that felt less like guessing games and more like quiet promises. Back at the cabin that evening, as we packed up to leave, Jason hesitated by the door, looking at me with that same mix of nerves and hope. Hey, he said, voice low. This weekend was more than I expected. I want to see where this goes. With us, I grinned, feeling that familiar flutter. Me too. And next time, maybe we bring 2 blankets. He laughed, stepping closer and slipping his hand into mine. Deal. Driving back to the city, the storm behind us, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected places and the smallest blankets can hold the biggest beginnings. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where this one would go. The ride back to the city felt different, lighter somehow. I kept my hand tucked in Jason's, the occasional squeeze reminding me that whatever this was between us, it was real. The storm was behind us now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, like we'd stepped into new territory without even noticing. Once we got to my place, Jason hesitated at the door, our hands still linked. The streetlights cast soft pools of amber around us, and I could see him wrestling with whatever thoughts were running through his head. So, I said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably, this was your plan all along, wasn't it? Trap me in a cabin, steal the blanket, and make me fall for you? He laughed, that easy, warm sound that always made me feel at home. Maybe. But can you blame me? I smiled, feeling the nerves bubble up again. Nope, not at all. We stood there for a moment, the night humming quietly around us. Then Jason leaned in, brushing his lips against mine, soft and steady. It wasn't the storm's intensity from the cabin, but something quieter, deeper, like a promise. When we finally pulled apart, I caught his eye and said, So, about that blanket situation. He grinned. I'm thinking we invest in a king size. We both laughed, the tension melting away, but underneath it, I felt this solid certainty. I wanted more of this, more moments shared like this, honest and unguarded. Over the next few weeks, things between us unfolded naturally. Texts turned into late-night calls, which turned into dinners and walks in the park. We didn't rush. There was no pressure, just a steady building of trust and something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: hope. One chilly Friday, Jason showed up at my apartment with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a grin that made my heart skip. Thought you might need this. I took the mug, fingers brushing his, and smiled. Your trouble, he shrugged, eyes twinkling. The good kind. We settled on the couch, the city lights flickering outside the window. I found myself leaning into him, his warmth seeping into me in a way that felt like home. The memory of that cabin, the storm, the tiny blanket, the vulnerability, was still vivid, but now it was layered with something new, possibility. One night, a few weeks later, Jason invited me over to his place. As I stepped inside, the scent of cinnamon and old books wrapped around me. He'd set up a playlist of soft songs and lit candles that flickered softly. I wanted tonight to be special, he said, leading me to the couch. No distractions, just us. It was exactly what I needed. We talked for hours, sharing stories past and plans future. At one point, he reached out and intertwined his fingers with mine, and I realized how natural it felt, not just physically, but emotionally. Jason, I said quietly, I think I've been afraid to hope, but now, I don't want to let go of this. He smiled, eyes shining. Me neither. And just like that, with the city buzzing faintly around us, I knew this was more than a weekend storm or a shared blanket. It was the start of something real, something worth holding on to. Looking back, I'll always remember that night in the cabin, not just for the storm or the one blanket, but for the moment 2 people stopped pretending and started really seeing each other. Sometimes it takes getting stuck in the middle of a storm to find the warmth you didn't know you were missing. And sometimes that warmth comes wrapped in the smallest, most unexpected packages. A few weeks after that night at Jason's, life settled into this strange but wonderful rhythm. We still had the same easy laughs and long talks, but beneath it all was this quiet understanding that whatever was happening between us was something neither of us wanted to rush or mess up. One Saturday afternoon, Jason texted me out of the blue. Want to come over? I've got something to show you. Curiosity got the best of me, so I agreed. When I arrived, his apartment smelled like fresh coffee and something faintly spicy, maybe cinnamon or cardamom. He greeted me at the door with that goofy grin that always made my heart do a little flip. Hey, he said, stepping aside to let me in. I figured since the weather's gross, we could stay in and binge something. But first, he reached into his bag and pulled out a slightly beat-up backpack and then a folded map of the city. A map? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, he said, unfolding it on the kitchen table. I thought maybe we could plan a little urban adventure. No phones, no distractions. Just us in the city. I smiled. Sounds like a plan. We spent the next hour plotting out a route, places neither of us had been, little coffee shops, quirky bookstores, and some parks that promised hidden trails. It was refreshing, this idea of exploring together without a plan other than to be present. The next day, armed with backpacks and scarves, we set out. The weather was crisp, the kind of chill that made your cheeks pink and your breath visible. We wandered through neighborhoods we barely knew, laughing at our terrible sense of direction and stopping for hot drinks at a tiny cafe tucked away behind some graffiti-covered walls. At one point, Jason pulled me aside onto a quiet bench in a little park. The trees were bare, the ground littered with leaves, and the late afternoon sun filtered through the branches. Remember that cabin trip? He asked, his voice low. I nodded. How could I forget? He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made me stop. I was nervous that night, not just because of the storm, but because I wasn't sure if you felt the same way I did. I looked at him, heart pounding. I was scared too, that maybe this was just a moment, and I'd wake up and it'd all be gone. Jason reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine smoothly, like they belonged there. "But now," he said softly. "Now," I answered. "I'm sure." We stayed there for a while, just holding hands and watching the shadows grow longer. The city buzzed faintly around us, but it all felt distant, like our own little bubble. As the sun dipped below the skyline, we made our way back to his apartment, fingers still linked. Inside, we found a quiet groove, cooking dinner together, stealing tastes of the sauce, and sharing stories about our families and the silly things that shaped us. Later, as we curled up on the couch, the blanket from that cabin trip came to mind. I laughed, remembering how tiny it was, how we'd fought over it, and how it had forced us together. Jason caught my eye and said, "Maybe we should get a bigger one." I smiled, leaning into him. "Definitely. But no matter the blanket, I think I'm just grateful we're sharing it." He kissed the top of my head, warm and steady. That night, as I fell asleep wrapped in his arms, I realized that sometimes the best adventures start with the smallest moments, like being stuck in a cabin during a storm, fighting over one blanket, and finding something you didn't even know you were looking for. And now, with Jason beside me, I knew this was just the beginning. Months had passed since that first stormy night in the cabin, and every day with Jason felt like uncovering a new layer, not just about him, but about myself too. We weren't perfect, far from it. We had our moments of awkwardness, miscommunication, and the usual bumps that come with learning how to be with someone in a real, honest way. But those moments only made the good ones feel that much deeper. One chilly evening, we found ourselves back in my apartment, wrapped up in a blanket, this time a king-size one that we'd bought together, mostly as a joke, but now a symbol of how far we'd come. The city lights flickered outside, casting gentle shadows, and the quiet hum of life beyond my walls felt miles away. Jason was leaning against me, fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm, and I realized how comfortable I felt, how safe. Not just physically, but emotionally, like I could be completely myself and he'd still be there, still hold my hand. "I've been thinking," Jason said softly, breaking the silence, "about that weekend in the cabin, about how it all started." I chuckled, remembering the chaos of the storm and the ridiculous size of that blanket. "You almost lost a leg to frostbite." "Yeah," he laughed. "But honestly, it was the best accident that ever happened to me." I turned to face him, eyes catching the soft glow of the lamp. "Me too." There was a pause, filled only with the quiet comfort of being close. Then Jason smiled, the kind of smile that reaches his eyes and makes my stomach twist in a good way. "You know," he said, fingers tightening around mine, "I never thought I'd find someone who makes the cold feel this warm." I nodded, squeezing his hand back. "Same here. It's crazy how one small thing, a stupid blanket, led to all this." He leaned in, brushing his lips against mine with a tenderness that made my heart stutter. "Here's to more blankets, more storms, and more moments like this." I smiled against his mouth, feeling a rush of gratitude for how unexpected and real it all was. As the night deepened, I knew the future wouldn't always be easy. There would be more storms, literal and figurative. But with Jason beside me, I felt ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the smallest things, like sharing one blanket during a storm, can lead to the biggest, most meaningful connections. And that was more than enough for me.